environment which is attractive, provide an environment where you can live, which is friendly, an environment where you live good, and an environment where you are, encouraged to improve your house. This is the very root, of any urban policy which is aimed at the conservation and the preservation of an historic city. Then, once you have defined these strategic goals, once you have defined the planning tools to achieve this result, once you have defined a policy to keep or to revitalize from the socio-economic point of view, to provide job opportunities, to provide income opportunities to people, then you can think that your measures of protection of the building may be useful. The experience shows that even the stricter measures, which are applied to building activities, are useless if the people don't want to live there, or it doesn't have reason to live there. They go away. They even with all the possible measures of protections, that urban fabric will decay and will become, perhaps preserved from the physical point of view for a while, and then it will begin to collapse. So that's why I insist on this general aspect, which has always to be kept in mind, because which are really essential, which are a complement of all the regulatory tools that you can develop. So, how long did which explains why, how the inventory was made, and so on. Why there is the banner? Well, and also the use that was made of the inventory.
It has a full screen also.
Mm-hmm.
It has a full screen.
Yes.
Okay.
No, it was the full screen, but now, so if you are interested, you can go to the materials and what's the use of how the inventory was structured for that reasons. And I'm going to say also a few words about how the inventory has been used. Unfortunately, the inventory is dead now, in the sense that the Yemeni organization, which was working with UNESCO, with whom prepared the inventory, now it doesn't exist anymore, or it still exists from an institutional point of view, but it doesn't have money, and so on and so on and so on. But
it's pending. Pending. It's,
let's say that it's pending, and due to the political situation, it's unable to do anything. It is without any resource and without any power. This is just to say that the inventory makes sense and the GIS makes sense only if there is a continuity in the time, only if there is a management of these tools that provides a continuous update and that provides a continuous use. Otherwise, the work we know, for instance, that the work that we did in Sana'a 6 years ago is now completely useless. It's something. The computers are there, the inventory is there, but there is nobody who uses it, and so nobody who updates the data, and it's finished. Well, I always like to start from the end, because all the stories have an end, and unfortunately this story has a sad end. But in any case, I think that from the methodological point of view, it was an important exercise, also because, as far as I know, it was the first time that a systematic inventory with the use of GIS was made by UNESCO in a World Heritage city. Anyone? Yes, yes, please. So, as usual, I have to explain the background. Sanaa was inscribed in the World Heritage List in '86, and at the end of the '80s, UNESCO launched an international campaign to save Sanaa, to serve for the safeguarding of Sanaa. And this campaign was quite successful, as we will see. But then, after the campaign, everything was stopped. The process of rehabilitation of the city was stopped, and the city suffered from a lack of management, a lack of protection, and there were many international requests to withdraw Sanaa from the World Heritage List because of the diffused interventions and transformations that really risked to spoil the city and to lose the values that justified their inscription. So, UNESCO sent a mission to Sanaa to see if Sanaa deserved to remain in the World Heritage List or not. And I was part of this mission, and I decided that Sanaa deserved to remain in the World Heritage List, that after all, yes, it's true that there were processes of not dilapidation, but a deterioration of the urban fabric, but these processes could be stopped and required some measures of protection, of regulation. There was not a conservation plan in Sanaa, and we were perfectly aware that the conservation plan, it takes years to be prepared, seriously. So we proposed to set up some urgent measures of protection, and in the while to implement an inventory of building and open spaces as a tool for starting a process of conservation and rehabilitation, giving the local administration, which is indeed a national administration, GOPSI, it's called the General Organization for the Preservation of Historic Cities of Yemen, something like that, which controls also the building activity. So the inventory was told since the beginning as a tool, on the one hand, to document the urban fabric, to understand what kind of processes tended to deteriorate the urban fabric, but also to give the GOPSI the possibility to monitor what was going on and to control the building activities. That is, the inventory, as we will see, then we will discuss in detail the survey form. The survey form was conceived indeed as a form not only for the survey but also for the documentation of the architectural characteristic and the state of conservation of the building. So a sort of baseline which could be used by the administration when someone asks for a building permission to see what it is, the building, what kind of intervention you can do, or to check, well, in 2006 when the survey was done, the building was like that. Why now is like this, and so on and so on. So to monitor the building activity and the life of the building. Few images and words of Sanaa that I don't know if you know, but is one of the most amazing cities which you can see on Earth, and I don't want to. We go back perhaps to these images to explain why and how the inventory was structured with a series of issues and with a series of data, which are really specific for Sanaa, which may not be applied in other cities, because every city requires a clear identification of the heritage characters that you want to preserve. The case of Sanaa is very peculiar. You see, Sanaa is characterized by these tower houses, This building showed the possible evolution of the houses in Sana'a. There is a basement in stone which is very closed and which was mainly used as storage and stables, whilst the dwellings were at the upper floors. Quite probably these structures still date from the 12th century, and quite probably in the very beginning they were kind of courtyard houses, but then growing in height like that, the courtyard has disappeared. The upper stores have been built in bricks and sometimes even in mud bricks, not only ways, how could I say, cooked bricks, I don't know what's the name in English, you know. So, differently from other Arab cities, the architecture in Sana'a is completely extroverted. So it looks outside instead of looking inside. And is an architecture of facade. The facade reflects the inner distribution of the houses, of the house, and is a very free composition of we may say standardized elements. So there are different types of openings that you can find in all the houses of Sana'a, but their composition may vary very much according to the building. Each of these elements which compose the facade has a name, as we will see, and is dedicated to a specific function. The most amazing are this system of windows that can be found in all the main rooms of the house, and which is divided in two levels. The lower one provides ventilation, are windows that can be opened, and the upper one is it cannot be opened. These are closed and with now with glass or even plastic, but in the past with alabaster, and many of them are still in alabaster. Alabaster, you know, is a kind of artificial stone that is transparent, colored sometimes. So the system of openings also is maybe even more complicated. For instance, you can find opening like this, which enables the women to look outside without being seen, you know.
Being out of sight.
Yeah, exactly. In other cases, similar devices are used as a fridge, you know. In Sana'a, the temperature during the night drops down very, sometimes very much, and is kept to keep the milk or the dairy products and so on. Well, I mean, the facade speaks of the life, you know, within the building, and is made of an incredible number of elements which are almost standardized and very often are framed with a white wash, you know. That's all. It's very simple. But it is extremely rich. Of course, there is, as I said yesterday, for Venice, there is not a style. There is rather a procedure. There is a language, if you want, you know, rather than a style. But unfortunately, now there are a lot of destruction, reconstruction, and elevation, which are made in such a way as to imitate, you know, the typical Sanani architecture, which means making an arch, and that's all. So this is probably one of the most serious reasons of deterioration of the urban fabric. The urban fabric is continuous. It provides an incredible variety of spaces. And the study we did tried to understand, first of all, how the city is structured and what different levels of protection the city would require. Because there was really nothing. Sana'a was described in the 80s, as I said. There was not even a map with the perimeter of the city to be protected. It was written that the World Heritage City was the city within the wall. But within the wall, of course, what does it mean? The walls do not exist anymore. The walls were destroyed almost entirely in the 70s and 80s. Of course, it was possible through aerial photographs and maps to identify the perimeter of the wall. In some cases, the walls, when Sana'a asked to be inscribed, they started to rebuild the wall using the traditional techniques and so on. But within the wall circle, there are many parts which are new, which have been built in the 60s, in the 70s. But I must say that until the 80s, even the new constructions perfectly reflected the traditional techniques, the traditional way of building, and it's difficult to find the difference between a building of the 30s or the 40s and the building of the 70s. Only the materials have become older or have been replaced, but the building is more or less the same. But what is interesting is that we discovered that beside Sana'a al-Kadima, the old city of Sana'a, which is inscribed in the World Heritage List, there are other cities which are as important, as interesting from the architectural point of view, that are still existing, but which are being very heavily deteriorated by urbanization, by demolitions and reconstructions, uncontrolled renovation, and so on. And so the study started with an identification also of other historic areas of Sana'a which deserve a level of protection, even if not of the same level than the World Heritage Site. And in the end, we will see we did two different types of inventory. One for the World Heritage Site, where all the buildings and all the open spaces were inventoried, and another one for the other settlements, like this one, Bir al-Azab, and another one to the north, where a large part of the historic fabric were completely destroyed, and where the inventory only addressed the historic areas, the remaining historic areas. So that inventory required, we will see later, a sort of a pre-inventory in order to identify the areas to be where the inventory, building by building, should be developed. A few words about the campaign. The campaign is one of the very few things that UNESCO can do. I told you yesterday about the very few powers of UNESCO. One of the powers that UNESCO has had in the past was to exercise a work of sensibilization, to launch a campaign for the safeguarding of Sana'a in this case, and to raise funds amongst different states in order to finance interventions which are aimed to the, in this case, to rehabilitation of this city, of this unique city that was really risked to be completely lost. The campaign focused on a number of interventions of adaptive reuse and restoration of some palaces and caravanserai, that is some special buildings, to be reused for cultural activities or to improve handicraft and commercial activities that were already present in the city. Then most of all, the campaign concerned the improvement of the infrastructure, of the urban infrastructure. It would be better to say that concerned the creation, the modernization of the infrastructure, which was totally absent. There were no sewages, no water drainage, no water supply. Streets were not paved until the 90s, until the 80s, the 90s. In the winter, it's difficult to say in the winter. Let's say in the rainy seasons, which are April, May, and July, August, you could not walk in Sana'a because there was mud everywhere. Streets were not paved, and so you could only move with a donkey or else with the boots or else. So you can imagine how this situation was detrimental, for the local handicraft and for the local activities. You have to consider that in the while the city was expanding all over, outside of the wall, and so without an improvement of the urban infrastructure, the old city would have been able to keep its activities. They would have gone elsewhere, So, one of the interventions which were funded by this campaign was the reconstruction, the completion of the reconstruction of the city wall using more or less traditional techniques. There were many discussions about the appropriateness, for instance, of this kind of pise, of adobe. But the reconstruction of the city wall started already before the campaign, and it's very ironical to see that what is considered to be the key monument of Sana'a, Bab Yemen, this one, is indeed a gate which has been totally, completely reconstructed in 82, according to a very fake Ottoman style. But anyway, it's very interesting, this fact. Here you can see that the city has been paved, new canalization were implemented, even if in many cases the implementation of this canalization is a real disaster because, for instance, the tube has been set after the paving, so when you walk, you risk to fall, because there is the canalization on the streets and so on. Nevertheless, the creation of this very basic infrastructure has allowed for the development, not only for the maintenance, but also for the enhancement and the development of a local handicraft, which is very rich and which created another risk of further transformation in the urban fabric. Most of the handicraft and the shops is concentrated in the souk area, which is this one, which traditionally was absolutely without any other function. In the souk area you can only find shops and workshops. You don't have residences at all. Well, the success of this infrastructure made the souk a place which is perhaps attractive for handicraft people to live in, and so they started, for instance, to build new stories about their shops, contradicting what used to be the general principle, upon which the city was built. But probably the most important intervention was the canalization of a river, which crosses the city. And this is a picture of the late 70s of my hotel, because I usually used to go here. And you can see that the river was free. When there was water, people don't pass, but since the water is only when it rains, it just wait a few moments and you can walk through. The river was not really a break, in the urban fabric. It was a very special place. There were no bridges, for instance, and so on. Now, the river has been canalized. This is an intervention which was implemented by the Korean cooperation, and so they are very hard. So they used stone everywhere. They built two very heavy and rigid banks. The banks now are parking in reality very often. And when it rains, the river becomes really a river. And if you are in the car there, well, it's quite possible that if it rains 10 kilometers far from Sana'a, all of a sudden you find the river in front of you. I mean, if you're lucky, you continue, otherwise you stop and you go outside. But anyway, these are some interventions of restoration and adaptive reuse. German cooperation, Swiss cooperation, Italian cooperation, French cooperation. These are some works of housing rehabilitation. All these interventions really provided a sort of the so-called Mekshmat and Bustans, that is orchards, for urban agriculture, were rehabilitated. And 5-6 years ago, this urban agriculture was again really flourishing, and also provided a supplementary income, to the people, because in the streets of the new city you could find people selling, the products of these orchards in the city. And of course, you realize that it was an essential component of the urban fabric. I tell you this because last time we went there 1 year ago, most of the Bustan and Mekshmat were almost abandoned due to the fact that the water table is moving up and down. In this moment is very low, and there is a shortage of the water, which probably is due to continue. But this is just to have a very general view. What was going on were, as I said before, a diffused deterioration of the urban fabric due to some major factor. The first one was that due to the attraction that the old city is still able to exercise with reference to the new city outside. Just to tell you a few figures, in the 80s the total population of Sana'a was less than 200,000 inhabitants, and 80,000 were the inhabitants of the old city. 6 years ago, the total population, presumed population of the city of Sana'a were 2.5 million, and the population of the old city were 90,000 inhabitants. So you can understand what I said yesterday. The old city of Sana'a, which was the city, now is nothing but a part of a larger urban area. But this part, the old city, still has a very strong power of attraction as far as all the traditional shops, handicraft, and culture is concerned. So it's still a center for the larger urban area. And as a center, it develops. So, for instance, the development of the handicraft and commercial activities has very much affected some streets which were entirely residential. The street which connect the souk, the central souk, to the two gates to the north and the south, has become like this. So has been transformed into commercial areas. And this is particularly negative, has a very negative impact on the residential functions of these buildings, which have completely lost their value, because Yemeni cannot accept to live in a building where stranger people may come, which they cannot accept, a family cannot accept to live with a shop underground, where a foreign population comes. And this is for a specific group of merchants or families. Because of course the diffusion of industrial goods, of industrial wares, does make necessary, reduces the need, of having storages, next to the shop. But another type of transformation was linked to the increase of income and to the opening of the economy to the external world. As a consequence, a lot of attempt of improving, the living conditions have been undertaken, and in this framework, there are a lot of interventions which are totally out of scale, even in a fabric of tower houses like Sana'a. This is a tower of almost 20 stories without lift that has been built on a mentionment. And there are many like this, 12, 13, 14. Yemeni, they are not afraid to climb stairs, but 20 stories is very much without lift. And it's a totally illegal building built on an empty land. But what is happening more frequently is the addition of 2 or even 3 stories, 2 buildings of 1 or 2 stories or 3 stories. And also, it has to be emphasized the fact that, in spite of the fact that they want to respect the law that says that it is mandatory that new buildings and new construction should reflect the typical Yemeni style, they intend the typical Yemeni style, this style, which is totally new, brand new, which imitates a little bit, the opening of the mafrage. The mafrage is a very special room at the upper floor of the traditional buildings, where the men sit to chew the cud and to see the landscape. So they have large windows which are different from the rest of the building and larger. And so in the new buildings or in the new vertical addition of the building, they do this mafrage type of window, which are evidently fake, completely fake, and which begin to really to uniform the facades and to destroy the typical and the typical, could I say, architecture of the city, which, as I showed you before, is made of standardized elements, which are composed in a very free and different way, creating a very rich facade. Then, the use of new and inconsistent materials is widespread. For instance, the shop windows tend to be made of aluminium. New bricks are used, which are industrially made and which conflicts very much with the traditional bricks which are cooked, how do you say, I don't know the English word, burned, yes, burned, yeah, exactly. Sometimes you may find also these bricks, for instance, are clearly just for cladding because the structure behind is a concrete, and they have the basis of the pilaster is on a brick wall, and so on. You have this kind of so the awareness of the government was, the awareness of this widespread deterioration of the urban fabric was also present in the government, that decided to do a sort of inventory of the so-called violations. These are the maps of the inventory of the violations made by the government, which was unusable, by the way, because the definition of violation was not clear. For instance, they took the law as a reference. The law says that all the buildings in concrete are forbidden. The law was issued in 95, but there were buildings built in concrete in the 60s, immediately after the independence. Well, this cannot be considered violation for the simple reason that when